All right, so today's quick vlog will be on how to buy an EV, a new EV and a used EV. Basically, just how to buy an EV when you are a customer in a developing country like Nepal. And of course, first thing is first, and that is budget. Your budget determines your price range and your car, depending on whether you are in a entry segment, a mid-tier segment, or an expensive segment. There are enough EVs out there in the market, unlike during COVID times where there were just a couple of EVs and you really struggled to pick the car of your choice. Right now, customers are almost spoiled for choices in terms of what sort of cars to buy. And I am going to go from the lowest, the cheapest, to the more expensive side, but also want to point out things customers should keep in mind when buying an EV, because unlike buying a petrol car, it's all about what that EV is going to be used for. Like, what is your personal driving style? How much do you drive every day? Where do you live, in the city, outside of the city, in a rural area, in an urban area? How long are your commutes every day? Like, from home to work, from home to hospital, from home to school? I don't know. How long are those commutes? You need to figure that out. And then, what is the condition of the road to the places you go? Like, is the road between your home and office pitched? Is it off-road? Is it bumpy? Is it unpitched? Like, what is it? And then finally, the last bit is, how often do you go on long trips? By long trips, I mean outside of the valley. Like, do you make a trip with your holiday hat on to, I don't know, Titwan or Pokhara every week, every month, or once or twice a year, like me and my family? All my family members are 9 to 5 job holders, and so going on a long vacation is far from many. Like, all of us getting enough holidays on the same time is just almost impossible. And so, yeah, we just can't afford that, going on a long tour trip every month or so. It has to be once a year, or maybe 2 times a year maximum. Sometimes when there's an emergency, 3 times a year, but it's always planned weeks ahead of time. It's never like, oh, let me go for a long drive to the other side of the country tomorrow morning. Yeah, that never happens. So anyway, back to EV buying guide. The first thing you need to check out is, after you have these questions answered, what are the cars available in the budget range? So basically, there are different budget ranges, and depending on that, do you need range the most? Do you need clearance the most? Do you need space inside the most? Or do you need it to be a very tiny car that just does up and downs in the city? You know what I mean? Like, what is your priority? Like, there are a lot of people that buy EVs as a secondary car, not just a primary. I know a lot of people can afford 2 cars in Nepal. Crazy. But is it going to be your primary vehicle or your secondary vehicle? If it's going to be your secondary vehicle, the good thing is you don't need to spend too much money to get around the city in an EV. Unless you are a public vehicle like a taxi, or you own some like crazy delivery business, chances are, if you are in the capital city of Kathmandu, which is supposedly the biggest city in Nepal, I'm saying that because it's still not very large in size, but it is like heaps and bounds larger compared to the next biggest city. A range of like 100 kilometers is more than enough. Like, personally, I don't drive more than like 50 kilometers a day, and I live into and work in two polar opposite parts of the town. So it's more than enough having a range of like 100, 120, or even 90 if you are to be completely honest. It's just that when you use AC, that range gets depleted quicker. So instead of a 90, you're gonna get like a 60 or a 50 even. But still, that's enough. And so, yeah, in that segment, there are micro cars. Now, we started with the Riva like almost a decade ago, and then we had the Mahindra E2O, which by the way is available in the secondary market right now for much cheaper. And then you have these newer cars like the Wuling Air EV, and then you also have the Comet, MG Comet. And that's one segment which provides around 100 to 200 km range, and it's literally like a tiny box on wheels. So you don't have to worry about parking, you don't have to worry about navigating in tight spaces, you don't have to worry about clearance on those cars, nothing. You just plug, charge, and go. Like, you're done. But then there's also the small entry-level hatchback EV segment that's like starting up in Nepal. It's still seen as like a cheaper alternative at the moment, and so I don't see too many buyers. But hey, if it's your first time EV, first time car buyer, you don't want to go the gasoline route, then you can always start with something like a Tata Tiago EV. Wuling have also just introduced their Bingo, and then there's this car, the Citroen EC3. It's got different variants of it, and these are all hatchback segment cars. This one's a bit more on the SUV design wise and practicality wise, but the others are like proper tiny city car wise, and they all have a range of, again, 150 to about 250, maybe 300 if you like really carefully drive it, you know what I mean? And so that's your next level. Because these cars are newer, they have not popped up in the secondary market yet. They will, I promise you they will. People will always want to change their cars after a couple of years. It depends on how many years, on everyone's financial background. But for the most, like within 2 to 5 years of owning a vehicle, someone or the other will have to leave the country, will have to sell the car for whatever number of reasons, and so it will pop up in the secondary market. It's 2024 that I am recording this now, so maybe by 2026, there would be a decent market. And then you come into a bit of a higher bracket, which is basically a hatchback, but a bigger size hatchback. So you have like the BYD Dolphin and the MG4. That's the cars that come to mind, but you also have the Tata Nexon, the Nexon EV Max, a facelift Nexon, and Nexon came here quite early in Nepal, so there is a definite secondary market for that car if you want to buy the earlier Prime versions or even the Max versions that came in with a bigger battery. And so that's definitely like a bigger hatchback, but still entry level car. Again, now these are prices that are creeping up towards 40 to 50 lakhs now, coming from the entry level micro budget cars that would come in like under 30, even under 20 in some cases. And then you come to one more segment higher, which is basically like a smaller SUV crossover thing. And so these cars definitely have the battery packs and motor capacity that, I'm not saying the smaller cars don't have enough motor capacity. They have more than enough. Like this vehicle is in an under 50 kilowatt motor category, so that's like a very tiny motor compared to EVs, but it will pull hills just fine. There's no gear in all these cars, so you don't have to worry. And when it's stop and go on a hill, you either have a handbrake like in this car or auto hold like in other cars, and they pull like no questions asked, no hassle. They just pull. That instant torque in an EV is just very, very convenient. And again, now the bigger mid-size SUV, as I call them, class. So you have like the Series 3, You have the Hyundai Kona, which I drive on a daily basis. You have the BYD Atto 3. You have the MG ZS. So this is the most like common type because it's that right size of SUV in the market, which is priced around 50 to 60, 70 lakhs, depending on the variant you buy. And it's got enough range, it's got enough space, plenty actually. And so what happens next is then you come into the more luxury segment when you cross about 70 to 80 lakhs. And these are cars that I would say the more affluent and people with money buy, or people that really just want a specific car. And here the price goes up like the sky is the limit in this category. Not everyone buys it. The government also taxes this category really high because it is a luxury good. It's not a necessity good at that point. Motor sizes up to now are up to 100 kilowatts, maybe 150 kilowatts, but beyond this point, 200 kilowatts, 300 kilowatts. You have cars that primarily come to mind are like Teslas. These are like long range, high torque, big motor cars. You have like Mercedes, which are imported. You have BMWs being sold that are electric. You have also some electric cars too, Chinese electric cars too, that like can cost in this category. And again, this is a very different segment that not everyone would want, because again, the purpose of buying an electric vehicle really differs between people to people. Are you buying it to get across town? Are you buying it to go long distances and save on fuel? Are you buying it to move things? Are you buying it as a private vehicle? Are you buying it for just the thrill of driving in a city with a tiny car? It really differs. And so you really have to like pay attention to what it is you're buying. And so buying a new car means everything comes spanky, clean, green. You really don't have to worry too much about what the state of the car is. You just need to keep in mind your commute distances, your roads, the underground parkings you go to, the budget obviously, and a couple of more things like how big the car is space-wise and stuff. And now coming on to the secondary market. Now things get a bit more complicated because the valuation of an EV car in the secondary market, at least in Nepal, hasn't been really determined yet. Like, prices are still stabilizing. People are very unaware of what the market value for a second-hand EV car is because, hey, unlike in a gasoline car that has gone a couple of thousands of kilometers, it makes no difference in an EV because you have things like your battery health, your motor really affecting how the EV would function. And so how do you value a car like that really comes to mind as to like how would you pick up a second hand EV, like what are the things you need to look for. And like I mentioned, the battery state of health, it's usually written as battery SOH, state of health, and that is basically your battery life. Like every battery, whether your iPhone, whether your car, whether your portable charger, your earphones, they have a limited number of lifespans, like full charge cycles is what it's called, before they start depleting. So do you know how when you buy a new phone, it really holds its battery all day, and over the course of a year or two, you have to charge it within like maybe half a day or maybe even less? Basically, that's your battery health depleting, and it's the same with cars. Unfortunately, you can't get across this science. And when a car, if you bought it hypothetically, if it gave you 100 kilometers at 100%, over time that would drop down to 80, 70, 50 depending on how old the car is. And so these are things that have to be estimated when you buy a new car. What is the sticker price sold range of that vehicle, and what is the customer buying when he or she is buying it in the secondary market? And then of course you have the normal things like, has it been in an accident, what's the wear and tear of the vehicle, what's the mileage count on the vehicle. So yeah, like a lot of different factors to like really put in. And also then it comes to banks, like will they finance these products? A lot of banks in Nepal will finance first bought like new EVs, but they won't necessarily finance second hand EVs at the moment because it's more of a liability, which can make sense. A lot of people do default on their loans, and the bank might not see giving a loan out to a secondary buyer as a viable option. You know what I mean? And so it gets a bit tricky in terms of how can you evaluate a EV in the second-hand market. But again, EV cars do depreciate a bit faster than the gasoline counterparts, at least at the moment. Maybe in the future that might change. That's the global trend I'm talking about. And so as long as you don't feel cheated when you buy an EV, it should be good. Just trust your gut on this. Do some solid research as to what other buyers are doing. And if you're the only buyer in the market, look abroad. Your car will 100% be sold abroad. And as a result, if you look at the depreciation in sticker prices abroad, you can probably correlate that to maybe something happening in Nepal as well. So good luck. Let me know if I missed out anything